My work always starts from the personal, and this story is quite a personal story. When I went last up to the Straits, the site that we were actually visiting was the site where my grandmother was born. What happens for me culturally when I go up there is we go and visit our elders in the cemetery before we leave, and it was a kind of surreal moment in one trip to be at the place of my grandmother's birth and then to visit her again before I left, sort of connecting those two moments together. The paintings are a response to an experience of being in a particular place, but they're also parts of specific memories that I have as well. There's 3 palm trees that were there present on the site, reimagined here as a sort of altarpiece. The hibiscus and the dove are also quite sentimental to me. They're sort of emblematic of my grandmother. In many ways, this work is about her. I guess I think quite theatrically. The work includes all the paintings and the piece of architecture as well, and so it is almost like a scene or like a stage and a set. In that way, that sort of theatre of it, it's like entering into a space and everything works together to sort of take you somewhere else. So the original chapel is, it exists as a ruin essentially, and it's sort of falling apart. Because of its difference, particularly on Moa in Boyd where I was, it stood out in contrast, in heavy contrast, and loaded in its history. The history of Christian missionary societies in the Straits and the way that that's transformed culture, but also quite connected in the sense of the idea of the spiritual or the sacred. And I was interested in those two ideas and the way that they were kind of rubbing up against each other. For me, it was about a process of transformation and sort of recreating the idea of it. And so it's a white piece of architecture that I've chosen to tile. It's associated with the way that tombstones are tiled, actually, in tombstone opening ceremonies in the Straits. The Torres Straits is a long way away. It's all the way at the top of Australia, and so many Torres Strait Islanders, for many different reasons, have to move to the mainland, and they take with them things that they can to remind them of home. It might be a pearl shell, or it might be a giant clam, or it might be planting hibiscus in the garden. These objects exist as sort of fragments of culture or place or connection to place, or sort of like an assertion of culture in those sorts of ways. It's very much about living away from a particular place and trying to access that from a distance. My work is grounded in a European lineage of oil painting. It's become a sort of fertile ground for me to explore issues of identity and history and heritage as they sort of relate to me in my family. I think the very act of making paintings in such a way and telling a story like this is extending what painting can do. In many cases, the medium's been used to sort of silence or sort of ignore those stories. It's interesting to me to look at sort of genres of painting like still life and landscape and portraiture, and to sort of think of ways that I could make something that speaks to me.